Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into the Vince McMahon docuseries on Netflix. This 6-part series features episodes that run for about an hour each, totaling 6 hours of compelling content. For this review, I'll be taking a podcast-style approach, so feel free to play the episode as we go along. I hope you enjoy this in-depth look at the docuseries, and I'll be discussing it even further during my live stream tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Warning: this docuseries will mention abuse, sexual assault, drug use, and more. Please be advised.
So this next episode is called Family Business, and this details Shane McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, and even Linda McMahon's involvement in the storylines that happened on TV for years. Linda didn't want to do it. She wasn't a showman like her husband and children ultimately became. And she was just like, I'm not a great actress. Don't make me do this. I really don't want to do it. And he's like, well, everybody's involved and the story needs you to be involved for it to be a complete circle. And there were times where Vince was doing the most, and Shane was very protective of his mother. He didn't like when Vince was publicly disrespecting her. Even if it was in a storyline, he was not a fan. He was very, very, very protective of his mother and his sister, if we're being honest. But Vince was just like, it's a storyline. No, we're playing characters. This is not real. Even though we're blurring the lines of reality and television, we need to maintain the fact that this is a story that we're portraying for entertainment purposes. This is not something that we're doing in our real day-to-day life. As the show progresses, when you get down to where Linda's talking, she involves her input in some of the storylines too. Like one storyline about her specifically, she was being drugged by Trish Stratus, and Trish Stratus was introduced to the E as the mistress of Mr. McMahon. And at that time, McMahon was definitely on steroids, which is weird because he had that steroid case back in the day, and then he took steroids so he can start bulking up. Once he bulked up, he stopped taking them, which I don't think they put that in this episode. But you could tell how he fluctuated weight-wise, and it was just like, you're really big. You're really big compared to where you were. You're juicy. You're juicy. Despite the fact that, WWE had just went through that massive ass scandal. It was a scandal, honey. He got off scot-free, but then he did start using the drugs, and so did everybody else. It was just like an unwritten rule there that they should do. And then it got really bad, which they'll get to that in a second. But Stephanie had major storylines. The one where she got roofied. Triple H slipped her a Mickey. They got married in the drive-through lane of Vegas when she was supposed to get married to Test. And he alluded to the fact that they had, messed around all night long and consummated their marriage. When you look at that story, it's problematic beyond measure. There was no easy way for him to do this without looking like a total creep. And nowadays, that would not be acceptable on WWE television. Not at all. Even he looks back at it, some of the stuff that they did, and was just like, eesh, that was a rough one, But here's the thing. During that time frame, society was different. There was a certain level that they could go to. There was a ceiling, and that ceiling got set because of WWE's wrestling entertainment, because of WCW's wrestling entertainment. There was a ceiling set for them and what they could and couldn't do. So they would, push the envelope, test the waters, and see what they could do. And they've done a lot. I mean, Mr. McMahon was literally burying his ass on TV every week talking about the Kiss My Ass Club. He had Trish Stratus on all fours barking like a dog on national TV. It was quite the scene. Women were very much used for sexual objects back then. There was no situation where they weren't, except for with Stephanie. She was the only one that wasn't heavily objectified, but she was objectified. So she was a bit more protected than the other women were. Like, if we're going to do hierarchies of how they were personified, like Linda was the most coveted. Linda never had to take her clothes off. She was never stripped butt naked in front of everybody. She was never exposed, bra, underwear, or any of that. Linda was never subjected to that type of scrutiny. Stephanie would be under her, and Stephanie was. Stephanie ended up being in bra and panties matches, if I recall. They have taken off her clothes on camera. You've seen her in her bra. She got a boob job, so she came out there with her tits out once. Like, it was a lot. It was a lot with Stephanie, but it was minimal compared to what they did with Sable, Jacqueline, Tori Wilson, Kelly Kelly, the girls from the expose over in ECW. Just, it was just the way that they portrayed women in that industry, in the industry at the time, especially on television. But to go back to Stephanie, she was an integral part of a lot of storylines for WWE, and for a lot of people. Stephanie McMahon lent, a lot of she lent a lot of depth to the story. Her and Triple H became this power couple, and she embraced the evil husband, and she slapped her own mother. It was a lot going on with Stephanie McMahon. Like, she was a bitch back in the day. Shane was just as bad. When Shane was running around with Vinnie Mac and they were doing the corporation thing, he was just as bad, tormenting people, doing exactly what his father was. He was being a junior. Even though he's not a junior, he was definitely Vinny's junior, okay? And the only one who usually would have any morals would be Linda McMahon. Now, Linda was portrayed as somebody who held more shares in the company than Vince did. So there was Vince, and then there was Linda. So there was Linda, Vince, Shane, Stephanie. That's how it went on TV character-wise with the hierarchies. And anytime Vince would go way too far, where shit was just out of control, there was no stopping it, Linda would pop up. And when Linda popped up, that's when the voice of reason would come into play. And she would often come in and she would be the one to set Vince straight, to get him to back off of a certain character. She usually was Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or Triple H, depending on the day or the time. She would get Stephanie's ass in line. She would also get Shane's ass in line. So she would be the barometer by which the family would be measured if Vince wasn't around, and everybody would fall in line when it came to her, because she would come in and exert her power over the family, because the family was literally out of control, running rampant all over the roster. I mean, Stephanie would be involved in the women's matches, tormenting the women, winning matches by like not even doing nothing. Like, literally somebody else would do all the work and then she would lay there and become champ. Shane McMahon became Intercontinental Champions in a similar fashion. But Shane always wanted to be a part of the business, very similar to his father. He wanted to, be a performer and all that good shit. And his dad did him the same way that his father did him. He, if he was a ring boy at first, helping to set up and break down the ring and all that other kind of stuff, which that job eventually evolved to roadies. That's where that ring boy scenario came from. It eventually evolved into roadies, and roadies are the ones who come in and break down the ring, put it up, set up the ring cage if they have a cage match, and then there's a crew that helps set up everything, make sure the ring ropes are tight enough, make sure the turnbuckles are tight enough. All of that happens under the guise of a particular crew that is made, that was, purchased, or rather, not purchased, but it is done under the guise of this crew, these employees of WWE, and they are the roadies that ensures all that stuff is put away, and everything is laid down properly during the show. So anyway, Shane McMahon got the gig similar to Vince. He was a ring boy. He then moved from being a ring boy to an announcer. And then, so he was like a ring boy, helping to sweep the ring, take the rings down and all that. He was a ring announcer. He was a referee. Shane had did everything and kind of like earned his stripes in the business. And then he became an on-screen personality with his father. And that happened with Stephanie after she graduated college. And then Linda McMahon was introduced into the fold as well. Now, in the beginning of this particular episode, they do go back to Vince's childhood again. This time, instead of just mentioning the physical abuse, they mention sexual abuse that was alleged to be from his mother. And it was incestuous, obviously. Vince says that when you're a kid and you're getting the beat out of you every day, he developed the philosophy that when he's done, if you're still alive and breathing, then you've won. And he said, I don't like looking back at the bad shit that happened to me when I was a kid. He said, you got to leave that shit where it is. You got to keep moving forward. You have to leave it where it is. Leave it where you find it, essentially. And he said he met his wife, Linda, when he was 16. From what I understand, Linda was 13. And he was introduced to Linda through his mother. That is very problematic, but I find that white people tend to date very much younger than they should. Like, I remember watching Ina Garten and her husband, Jeffrey, and she met him when she was like 17 and he was in his 20s. And she used to give him brownies in like a little shoebox. And I think they weren't like officially dating then. I don't remember the whole story, but I remember Jeffrey was much older when he met Ina, and she was like 17, like when they met. And I know that he was like in college. And I was just like, no one sees how weird this is. Everybody's just like, oh my God, they're the perfect couple. I'm like, well, so to me, the age range for them meeting was odd. I was like, she's a preteen, barely. You're a teenager, a hormonal teenager at that, dating a 13-year-old. Now, I don't know if he actually dated her when he was 13. When she was 13. So I'll put an addendum in that. I'll say, okay, they're saying they met when she was 13 and he was 16. No one says exactly when they started dating. So I'll be fair and play devil's advocate and say, okay. But eventually Vince, like I said, he came from very humble beginnings, poor beginnings. And Linda came from the average middle class family. She wasn't superiorly rich, but she wasn't impoverished either. She was a all-American middle class family is where she came from. And Linda said when she met him, he kind of was the bad boy type, which she liked. He was very different from the cookie cutter all-American white boy that she had been used to seeing. And Vince had a little bit more grit to him, and she liked that part of him. Well, I just heard that the woman was 17 when they got married. So clearly, Vince already being 3 years older than her, that means that he was 19 when they got married and she was 17. So they had to start dating when she was about 14, 15. I don't like it. It's weird. It's not right. It's not right. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't look right. But it's their business. It's their business. I don't know. But the timing of it is 3 years. So he had to start dating her at 13. He was 16 They got married when she was 17. That means 1, 2, 3. He was 19. I don't know. Something about that just feels icky. It feels icky. Now he said he promised that he would love her, promised he would take care of her, and then he promised that there'd never be a dull moment. And well, I will say, Vince, you've lived up to that. You've lived up to that wholeheartedly. you definitely have given her never a dull moment. Like this, aside from the business itself and the antics and the things you've done to get this business where it is now, the sacrifices that Linda had to make for y'all to be the billionaire family that you are now, she got to be a strong woman to be able to deal with that. Because I probably would have left your ass a long time ago. To leverage everything, our home, any assets we owned, all for the sake of this business possibly going where it needed to go. And then the highs and the lows of this business. Like there was a level of suffering, or I would say to a lack of a better term is sacrificing. It was a level of sacrifices that Linda had to make to ensure his dreams got to where they needed to go. I don't think that I would have been able to agree with that. But she a different woman than me. Me personally, he would have had to have a backup plan. And I mean, like your ass needs to be, if this doesn't work, you're going to corporate America, working in marketing and getting things off the ground. Because if we're going by just him as a businessman, right? His marketing capabilities is impeccable. He is very, very good at understanding how to utilize trends, world events. Like he was one of the first people to start really doing that before social media became a thing, before we were able to focus on trends and actually physically see them as normal consumers and civilians. He was able to take things that were happening in the news and that was very much a talking point for most people around the world and use that as a marketing for WWE. He understood how to invoke emotion out of the fans. I have said this for so long about wrestling and I get argued to the ground about it. But anytime you're watching the stories and it invokes an emotion from you, happy, sad, um, you're in that gray area where you don't really know what to think when it comes to certain superstars, or you're stuck between one guy and another, or you are extreme hatred, or you're just infatuated and in love with this one. It means that they've successfully been able to do their job to draw you into the story. If you are invested in what you see, to see it to the end, then you understand that each part within that story has been completed successfully because of the reactions that you've received, or rather given to them from the story that's playing out in front of you. It's very much like watching Avengers Endgame, or you're watching The Revenant. The actor has to work to portray the story effectively. If they don't, then you lose the whole point of watching the movie. You're not concerned with who they are as a human being. You're only focusing on what is being portrayed on the screen. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. You don't sit up and watch New Jack City and believe that Nino Brown and Wesley Snipes are one and the same. You don't do that because you understand that he is portraying a character. And Wesley Snipes did his character so well that that character has followed him throughout his entire career, despite the fact that he's done so many other things and so many other great characters, like his character in Demolition Man. Blade was like one of his biggest films. He's done amazing things in his career, but everybody goes back to Nino Brown. Everybody. Because that was the iconic aspect of his career. In Vince McMahon's case, when it comes to wrestling, the Mr. McMahon character, the overall character, is his iconic moment. That's his grand scheme of things. But we're going to get into that in the final review of this show. To go back to the storyline that they are referencing in this episode, the storyline was the drugging of Linda McMahon. Stephanie McMahon was very much on her father's side. The dynamic of the kids was very interesting to me. Oftentimes, Stephanie exhibited the ruthlessness that her father would exhibit, and Shane was more like his mom in terms of how he would operate as a baby face. He didn't really remind me of Vince when he was a heel. He was kind of just himself. But Stephanie was ruthless. She was very, very cutthroat. She did not take any prisoners, and she just was the embodiment, the female embodiment of her father 100%. I love Stephanie. Like she was the one I hated the most out of both of them. Character wise, I hated her so much, especially when the shift in the power changed and the Mr. McMahon character transitioned more into the back, and we got Stephanie in control. GMs were back in control, and we didn't see McMahon as often. We were, looking at the authority more specifically. I think like from 2014 to like 2017, 2018 was when the authority was in power for a while. And that would shift in terms of power as well. People like Mick Foley would be in power. Then he got fired. The authority took over. And then you had people like Baron Corbin who were in power. They were, dubbed as the concierge, I believe, for the authority. Kane was in power at one point when the authority had took over. The power shifted, and Shane had left by then, and Stephanie was the only McMahon that was an on-screen, on-air personality that actually, interacted with everyone. And she was very, very integral in creating the stories, and I just hated her. I hated her so much, and I used to love when she used to got her comeuppance. I used to love it. Oh, I relished in it. I used to hate her so much, but as an adult, when you understand that it's just a TV show and these people are not portraying this in real life, you learn to appreciate what they were able to do. And the way Stephanie just really, she didn't fall into it, but she really understood the nuance of it. Like she was very, very invested. And I love that. I loved it. But I hated her character. I hated her character so much. Hated it. I hated it. There was one story that she did, and she wasn't a bad guy at that time, I don't think. No, she wasn't. And the Undertaker kidnapped her, and he was talking about marrying her, and he looked like he was about to sacrifice her on that Undertaker cross. Scared the living daylights out of me as a kid. And then I remember he strung somebody else up on that cross before. And I think that it was her, because they hung her from the stage. She was on that cross because they had her in the ring at first, and then they walked her back up the ramp. They clamped the hooks to the cross, and then they hung her, and she was like, strapped down to the cross, and you can see it. And I was just like, oh no. I was very, very terrified at that point. And it don't take much to scare me, honestly. I am a scaredy cat, especially when it comes to weirdo shit like that. I was very much scared. But then again, you have to remember I was like a teenager, a preteen teenager, I believe, at the time. It just scared the living daylights out of me. It terrified me. I had nightmares seeing that girl hanging on that cross like that, and her dad let him do it. He let them do it. Now, if I'm crossing the two events, because I do have a tendency to do that, that I swear that she was hanging, and it could be like a Mandela effect or whatever, but I swear that that girl was hanging at the top of the key with like Undertaker looking up at her. I know that that happened. At least that's how my brain is processing it, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But to go back to the show, sorry, tangent. Okay, so McMahon and Shane McMahon at the end of this storyline with Trish Stratus being the mistress, Linda being drugged, and Stephanie being a part of her father's evil villainous plan. Shane McMahon didn't like the abuse his mother was suffering from. And so the match was set for Mania. Shane McMahon versus Vince McMahon with Mick Foley as a special guest referee. And the comeuppance came here at this match. So everything that was done, because Trish Stratus was introduced in this doc, and she says that she's always asked about that scene and if she was like, humiliated, if she felt horrible. But Trish was very much like, I was acting, this is a job. Like, I wasn't humiliated because he wasn't talking to me. Essentially, he was trying to make the character of Trish Stratus, pay for what he felt like was a betrayal to him. And she said this was about creating an uncomfortable moment and an emotional scene for everyone to see. But this is how they got you invested in the fight between Shane and Vince McMahon. That was all a part of the story. In the finish of that particular story, Trish Stratus stood up to Vince, slapped him, and walked away. Stephanie kind of helped him in this match, but ultimately the finish was that Linda McMahon wasn't as sedated as people thought she was. She stood up, kicked McMahon in the family jewels, and Shane McMahon was able to hit the coast to coast and pick up the win, avenge his mother. And, everybody got to see Vince get his comeuppance, which was the plan all along. And essentially what Vince ended up saying was, when you have a story where the villain is always the one winning and everything finally gets that culmination moment and it finally has a resolution, he said it just feels good. During that match, Shane McMahon felt like he couldn't strike his father, but his father, he ain't got no problem busting Shane McMahon in his face, bro. Hit that man in his face for real, and had that boy's eye swollen. Now, in my opinion, it's my opinion, I would have knocked my daddy out. If I'm in the ring and Vince McMahon is my dad and he started two-piecing in the biscuit me the way he did Shane, I'm not clotheslining shit. We boxing, nigga. I'm finna square up fight you. This a street fight anyway, so ain't no motherfucking rules. Like, bring your ass here, boy. I'm gonna hit you with a 2-piece and an extra biscuit. You feel me? You get your ass whipped today. My eye swollen too? Oh, hell no. I don't give a fuck about none of that. Match over. It's ass whooping time. This the time that you grabbed my rib meat and then cheated when we was fighting. That's your 2-piece. Nigga, I'm gonna be beating your ass. And everything you ever did to me when I was a kid, all that shit coming out while I'm whooping your ass. I'm be in my head like, yeah, I'm gonna knock your fucking teeth out. We'll push your shit. You know what I'm saying? He real nice. Because I would have forgot. And I'd have just whooped your ass. Period. I'd have just blasted your shit. Straight up. That's the reason why Shane McMahon was in the match instead of me. Okay? Because there is a reason why I am not involved in storylines on that type of front. Because if the lines of reality and kayfabe are blurred, oftentimes, even if we go on the back, you like, good shit, straight up. In that moment, I'm going to beat your ass, bro, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm hitting you with no soft elbow, and I'm not going to stomp the shit out you. I am going to hit you. Especially if I get slapped and it wasn't on the script. You done improvise. Now I got to improvise and whoop your ass. Like, are we slapping niggas? We slap? All right. I'm gonna square up on you like we in the streets. You finna get Sharkeisha like right now. Like don't fucking play with me. That's that's the one thing that I probably, if I ever get involved in anything like that, I probably would never, ever, ever be an on-screen character in any way, shape, or form. I can't do it because I cannot separate church and state like that. My brain will not allow me to do so. Now, if I'm outside of it and I'm watching, sure, because I know what I'm looking at. But if I'm in the middle of something and I'm like conversing back and forth and somebody say some real out of pocket shit, I'm like, I'm trying to figure out who the fuck you talking to. I'm going to forget about network television. I'm going to forget about fines. I'm going to forget about all of that. All that shit go out the window when you say some bullshit to me. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? So these people are much stronger than me. Because I'd have knocked Vince McMahon's old ass out. There wouldn't have been no street fight. Because it'd have been a 1-round fight. Just a full-on Mike Tyson knockout, nigga. You are going to bed. Just sleep. And his eye was really swollen. Like, I would have been mad. The storyline of Sable and Vince McMahon is what came up next. And Sable felt like the WWE were exploiting her sexually, which to be fair, they were, but they did that to every woman. Sable was highly popular. She was a ratings draw for WWE. And the only person that drew her numbers or anything close to her numbers during Sable's first time in the E was Stone Cold Steve Austin. When Sable got tired of the bullshit, I guess you could say, she decided to leave and sued Titan Sports, which is why I didn't even realize they were called Titan Sports as their original name, but that is their original name. The pseudo name or the preferred business name, the DBA as it is called, is WWE. So Titan Sports is the main company, it's the brand, it's the company. And then they have a preferred name that they go by, and that is the WWE Corporation. Now, Sable sued Vince McMahon for sexual harassment. He claims he doesn't remember the allegations in the lawsuit, but she went on the late night talk show and she basically was like, they made me do things that I didn't want to do. And he was like, he was asked, did you make Sable do things that she didn't want to do? And Vince was like, I don't think I ever made her do anything that she didn't want to do. Then Sable came back and worked in WWE even after she sued them for sexual harassment. So to give you more context into this lawsuit, Sable sued WWE for $110 million. Okay. This was back in 1999. Sable cited allegations of sexual harassment and unsafe working conditions. In the documents that were unearthed around the time that Donald Trump hired Linda McMahon to be a part of his administration, these sexual harassment lawsuits that had been, long buried came up. And essentially what it says is that Sable filed a lawsuit of $110 million for sexual harassment, unsafe working conditions, and steroid abuse in the WWF. Sable said that WWF instructed her to expose her breasts, and someone smeared feces on her personal belongings. That's fucking nasty, by the way. You a goddamn monster. You nasty bitch. She also says that male wrestlers punch holes in the wall between the women's and men's dressing rooms to view female wrestlers. She said WWE didn't see WF wrestlers use steroids, but she speculates that a lot of the tempers that rage during the matches can be attributed to wage. She asked to be released from her contract and be able to retain the rights and profits from future merchandise of the name Sable. The lawsuit was controversial at the time, and few of the details of the lawsuit was made public. Sable complained about her concerns and the humiliation that she was constantly facing. And she said it was not only interfering with her well-being, but her mental health as well. She said, for example, that the men would routinely walk into the women's dressing room as if it was an accident. Men would cut holes in the walls to watch the women dressing. Extras were hired as WWE staff regulars to expose their breasts. Big nipple contests were engaged in, and men regularly bragged about their sexual encounters without regard to the women being present. WWE produced catalogs, t-shirts, depicting Sable in a degrading fashion, offering sexual favors. Sable requested the display affection to women to promote a lesbian angle. She was requested to be a part of a lesbian angle and display affection. She asked to have her gown, she was asked to have her gown ripped off repeatedly, notwithstanding promises to the contrary. And she says that she was asked to expose her breast by mistake on national television during wrestling contests. That was common fare for Sable and several other women who were on the roster. She was not the only one subjected to that. I mean, just about every woman who worked on that roster at the moment had those types of moments. Trish Stratus being one of them, Jacqueline being one of them, Victoria, and all the women who came behind them, Dawn Marie, Tori Wilson, Maria, like everybody pretty much had a moment where they had to be overly sexualized. And Sable said she didn't want to do it, but there were points where she did. Jim Ross said that he dismissed the case. He said Sable was just using it as an excuse to leave WWE and enter into Hollywood, which I don't know if I can exactly agree with that, given the fact that she's talking about backstage stuff as well. And to be fair, I can believe it. The way that they operated on TV wasn't too far from how they treated women in the back. So I'm going to lean more towards the idea that she's probably not lying about them cutting holes in the wall, trying to watch women undress, walking into the women's locker room. The feces being spread all over her things probably came from another woman who was pissed about her being the number one girl, because she definitely was. So that probably was some bullshit, but that's an unsafe working environment. And even if she told anybody, nothing would be done. But it said JR's response was WWE would not release Sable because she was a huge name for the Federation. She really carried a lot of tickets, even just when she went down to the ring and greeted the crowd. On the other hand, she wanted to distance herself from the company to devote herself to another of her great passions, which was acting. The reality is that she listened to the wrong people. You can see her in 1,000 ways, but that's the truth. I don't know about that, because I feel like y'all really were some savages when it came to the women. I think Sable has some legitimacy to her claims. Paradoxically, in Sable's case, it became too big of a situation for her. She just wanted to get out of the wrestling world and enter Hollywood. Her biggest shock, I believe, the $110 million lawsuit she filed with WWE was decided by her to create a pretext to leave this world. In fact, I have never seen the papers from this lawsuit, and I just think that it was an excuse. This is all Jim Ross's recollection of this lawsuit, but the lawsuit was actually real. Vince McMahon ended up countersuing Sable for control of the stage name Sable. Sable later reduced the 110 amount she was seeking in damages, and it all ended with Sable and WWE settling out of court for an unknown amount, though presumably it was much, much smaller than 110 million. The question you have to ask, do you believe Sable and whether her accusations against WWE was true? I believe that it was true. I think that they were gross to the women in the back in the day. I don't think they had any respect for the women. And given the environment they curated, the type of programming they were putting on, that wasn't far from the truth about their behavior. According to X-Pac, he admitted that on Sable's last day in WWE, not long before filing the lawsuit, he defecated in Sable's bag. Because so he was the one who did it. You're a fucking asswipe. He defecated in Sable's bag while doing an interview for kayfabe commentaries. And this sounds like the kind of harassment that Sable was talking about. He's such a dick, bro. Like, I think what happened to Sable was real. I do believe that it was real. I do believe she participated in some of it because she felt like she had to. I do think that she was pressured into doing a lot of things, but I do think that the lawsuit she filed against the E was real. Now, her coming back to the WWE, I think what ended up happening is she left, she got her settlement money, and then she decided to try to go into acting. I don't think she was able to use the name Sable when she did that. And because of that, that really hurt her in the acting world. And I guess she just was like, you know what, I'll go back, but they got to make some changes. And if they agree to do some changes, then I'll do it. And then they decided to use the reality of their situation as a storyline, and it worked. It worked. Sable was back to being a household name. Vince McMahon was still looking like an old, creepy man. And Stephanie was the hero in this particular storyline and situation. I don't even think that Shane McMahon was even present at the time. If he was, he had already been left WWE, and then he was getting ready to start like that purchase of WCW. I think that was around that time. I can't remember. Either that or he was like over Raw and they just didn't cross paths because it's been a while, so I just don't remember. As it shifted in this particular part from his character, it went to a Playboy interview he did. And in that interview, he admitted to having multiple affairs on Linda. He said that when Linda found out, she was crushed, and he was very saddened by that. He said that the sex was great, but from an emotional standpoint, he regretted. The Playboy interviewer asked him, did he change? His exact words were, I learned about the ramifications of a sexual relationship if you're married, which the answer to that is a roundabout way of saying, no, I know how to do it now without her finding out. Or at least be better at it so that I can cheat in peace and she could do what she wants to do. Because he could have just said, yes, I have changed because I don't want to hurt my wife anymore. He didn't say that. He said, I learned about the ramifications of a sexual relationship if you're married. That's not answering the question. You're trying to deflect from the question. We know the ramifications of a sexual relationship if you're married. You knew that before you slept with another person. What you didn't understand or know was how you would feel after you did this to the person that you were married to and claim you love. That's what you're trying to cover up more to say. But the ramifications, you knew what the fallout was going to be. You were well aware of that. You knew it was going to hurt your wife. You knew this could possibly destroy your family, but that wasn't of your concern. The only thing that you're really concerned about now is how it made you feel. You don't care about how it made her feel because your ass kept doing it. One thing about Paul Heyman is he got away with words, but he does know how to explain it so that it is easy for you to digest and understand. Paul Heyman says that Vince McMahon had one monogamous relationship in his entire life, and that is with the business. It's the only thing that he loves wholeheartedly, puts all of himself into, never neglects, never hates. He will love this business to the day he dies. He says he super serves it with his heart and his passion and his life. And that is 100% true because he's never cheated on the business. He's cheated for the business. Everything he's ever done has been for the business and for the love of the business. But anybody else around him in his circle, anybody else that he loves, anybody that he's been with, they are all collateral damage to this business. He will sacrifice blood to get this business. So Vinnie Mac decides to take WWE public. Making WWE go public, he said, ultimately was a good business decision, which in all fairness, I can agree with. Going public opens your business up to more money. It allows for you to expand on the brand of WWE, which they did. They opened casinos, they opened bars, and they were allowed and given the freedom to be able to reinvest in their business. That meant investing in their superstars. That meant better pay for their superstars. That also could have meant better health care for the superstars. And just the entire situation improves because there is more money being funneled into the company and investors are being brought in. And then there is a whole situation where the company is now able to afford to expand in other ways. It may not be in different businesses, but actually expand in the business that they are the biggest in. Insert Ted Turner's WCW. How this came about was WCW was on quite the decline. And the way that Bischoff prefaces it is that wrestling has always been a carny type of sport. It's never anything that anybody considers to be worthwhile. It has always been lowbrow entertainment. It was along, and for a long time, it was along the lines of what Jerry Springer was doing because that's what Vince Russo was writing for WWE at the time. Anyways, what happened was Eric Bischoff got cocky. At the time before the AOL Turner merger, before Time Warner and Turner Media merged into one massive company, Eric Bischoff had a lot more creative control over the product. They had a lot more wiggle room to be able to create quality wrestling and focus on that. When that door shut and Ted Turner decided to sell, or more specifically merge with these massive companies, this created a room of board executives that did not understand the product. They never watched wrestling, so they didn't understand what exactly it was. And they turned it into what it used to be, which was a carny show. They had a Viagra on a pole match, which is insanely dumb. They had pool fights. They had, blood coming down in the ring and shit. And they did that in the E2, but that was because Gangrel was a vampire character, so it worked for him. And the Brood, you know what I mean? They terrified me too, by the way. But then, they decided once the product was bleeding money and it no longer was giving good ratings and making them money, that's when they decided to sell. And essentially what it was a sabotage thing. So the executives didn't like the product to begin with, so they would tell Bischoff what they wanted him to do on the show. And if he didn't like it, it didn't matter. It was what they wanted to do. So they were trying to sabotage the product. They were trying to destroy it. They were trying to break that product down so much so that it would be worthy of being sold so they can get rid of it. And Bischoff, they didn't give a fuck about Bischoff. They didn't care about the superstars. They didn't care about any of that. So once Turner went to Vince and was like, hey, we're looking into selling. Are you interested? Vince said, yeah, of course. Within 3 days, they were selling. So I remember the night that they announced that Vince McMahon had bought WCW. The reality is Vince bought WCW for about $2.5 million. That is a very low amount for the type of company that WCW had built themselves up to be. But like I said, from the sabotage of the executives of the newly formed Time Warner or Turner Warner Company, whatever you want to call it. From that sabotage going into what WCW fell from and what they became, it was easy to see that they just simply wanted to get rid of it, which is what they did. They got rid of the product, and Vince used that as his own character. He announced like that he won the Monday Night Wars. It was such a good evil way to do it. But then enters Shane McMahon, and he announces that he actually owns WCW. And then we started getting the invasion angle. We started to see the guys coming in like Booker T, and I think Rey Mysterio was coming in at the time. Eddie Guerrero, I believe, was coming in at the time. All of these guys from if I got it wrong, please excuse me. But most of these guys from WCW were a part of that invasion angle, and they were coming in destroying everything. They were taking people out. And it ended up where the WWE absorbed all these massive contracts, these guys. And I always wondered how they could afford to pay everybody. You know, I was like, how are they affording this? And I mean, it was a lot of fucking people. So they had a massive roster of people. And at that time, SmackDown and Raw were the only shows they had. And oftentimes they would run stories separately and concurrent. Like sometimes Vince would be on Raw and SmackDown and would be running shows on both. And then when their roster was so massive, that roster got so fucking bloated, they would have so many matches, so many shows. It was nuts. You could not keep up with the amount of stars that they had on that roster. That was an era of WWE that was fucking crazy, where every aspect of wrestling was good, or it got good. The women's division had got solid. There was some still misogynistic bullshit that they were doing. There was still some bra and panties. There was still some humiliation type shit. But like they really started to allow the women to at least be able to have matches and wrestle. So that's, and the storylines with them were always interesting and fun to watch. Then you had the mid-card division, the tag team division, that main heavyweight division. Everything was like moving and it was solid, and he would separate the rosters so they were on different shows and you got to like pick what you wanted to watch. It was such a good time in wrestling. I really enjoyed that time frame. I hate that if it was bad for some of the guys in the back and horrible that they had a hard time. I really hate that, because visually and on screen, it just was a good time. So after the acquisition of WCW and all of that, Vince McMahon is the type of guy who needs competition in order to push him to do his best. When he doesn't have that, he gets a little complacent, and then he seeks to have that competition in another way. And in this case, he decided to start the XFL, and the XFL was his way of having competition and competing with the NFL. I mean, they wouldn't let him buy a team, so he decided, I'm going to make my own. You got to give it to Vince, man. He has a mindset that I think a lot of people envy. I don't think in terms of his depravity or the way he views people or how he uses people or how he treats people do they care for him. But I think the way that he operates in terms of how much audacity he has and how he just has the expectation that he's gonna win no matter what, and no one's gonna be able to stop him. It is a delusion of grandeur that most people could only dream of having. Most of us wallow in our own self-pity, and we all do not operate to our maximum potential. And that is because we're often told and silenced to that, but we are often told that we're not good enough. We'll never be able to be great. Nobody's going to care. You need to do the bare minimum because you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough. You are constantly being browbeaten with the no's, the negatives, and the I can'ts. So your brain begins to operate under the guise that you can't. And that's just the knee jerk reaction for most human beings because society tells us what we should and shouldn't be. He doesn't operate under the guise of any restraints, mentally or physically. He operates as if there are no obstacles in his way. And if there are, he will do whatever it takes to get rid of them, even if it means he has to cheat. The morality of what he's doing doesn't come into play because he feels like it's not personal. I want to succeed. It has nothing to do with you as a person or me trying to attack you. It has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with me getting what I feel I want and what I feel I deserve. So you can take it personal if you want, but it's not personal. It's just business. I would kill for that mentality. But then I think so I do want to operate under that guise, but not to the fullest extent. I want to be able to do what I need to do to be successful in what I want to be successful in, right? But I don't want to kill anybody in a sense of destroying somebody else's opportunity, taking something from somebody, or in anything of that nature, just so that I can compete on the same level as them or close to them. Because I feel like if I'm better and if it's meant for me, it's going to come to me with the work that I'm putting in, right? I don't need to cheat. I don't need to do underhanded tactics to get to where I am. But any billionaire that has operated under the guise that Vince McMahon has, that's how they've acquired their billions. No billionaire is innocent in any way, shape, or form. You can't get to a billionaire status by being a good person. I don't care what anyone says. The kind of wealth that you're accumulating requires you to be cutthroat, emotionless, with no care or regard for the people around you. And that's exactly what he is. I don't think I want to be that, but I do want to have his audacity and tenacity. I do. I can admire the good traits of his personality and still hold him accountable for the depraved things that he's done. At his core, I don't think that Vince is a bad person per se, but I do think that his lack of care for humanity and his lack of care for people in general is why he has such a depravity. And he has this sexual drive that is really, really outlandish and gross. And I think it also stems from his childhood. But he's so easy to read sometimes for me because I can see through the facade that he puts up. It's very much a facade and it's a protective thing due to what he's been through as a man. It's protection. I have to protect myself. I can't let anybody in because people will hurt me. That's the little boy in him doing what he has to do. I really wish he would have went to therapy and learned how to communicate his feelings better, understand why he has these wrought desires, because he could have easily been a better human being had he had went to therapy. I'm gonna stop that episode here, and then we're gonna continue and get through this second half of the family business. So we got a lot going on, y'all. Vince McMahon starts the XFL, and he wanted to give people the same quality of storyline, but also football. He knew nothing about football. He didn't care to know anything about football. He put together this league, got teams, coaches, entire owners, and everything. And then they played and they had shitty games. People actually enjoyed it. The ratings were great. But the game sucked. And it was because he didn't do his due diligence in truly vetting this out. What he should have done is went to scouts, found really good scouts, got really good talent for football. Maybe people who didn't quite make it in the NFL but wanted to play football. There were a couple people there, but they had bad quarterbacks, bad offensive line, bad defensive line. There was really, it was just bad. It didn't do well in terms of it actually being quality football. So the NFL was just like, you can't portray football like it is a WWE entertainment. It doesn't work that way. They have to be able to perform the sport in order for it to work. You were trying to turn actors and lowbrow quality football players into superstars. And that's just not the way that this works. The XFL did horribly. The media destroyed Vince McMahon with the XFL. And Bob Costas was just like, he got under his skin. He was able to reel him in, and he just got very, very irate on camera. He kept getting closer to him. He kept getting very belligerent. He was being he was at the point where he was just like mimicking him. He was so annoyed with the questions that he was asking. But Bob Costas did warn Vince before he got in there, like, hey, we're going to have some tough questions here to ask you about this XFL business. And Bob Costas said, Vince said, fine. But when Vince is asked, Vince has a different recollection, which often happens with him. He says, oh, well, I thought they were going to be friendly and I thought they were going to ask about the XFL, but that wasn't the case. But just prior to that, he said that the media wasn't too nice and that NBC tried to make it, a good thing, but the media wasn't nice to them about the XFL. Something tells me that Bob Costas is telling the truth more than Vince is telling the truth. And I think that even though he is as cutthroat as he is, he's more sensitive than he wants everybody to believe. And when somebody it's not a sensitivity about him or a sensitivity about his family in any of that. He's very sensitive about his creativity. He doesn't like anybody questioning it. He doesn't want anybody downing him or destroying his creativity. Cutting down the WWE, cutting down the XFL is like a knife in his heart. It kills him. So that struck a nerve with Vince for Bob Costas to ask these questions, pull out data and stats like that, and really embarrassed him. And it embarrassed his creativity. He didn't like that. It stepped on his toes. So he went on the defense in the strongest way that he could without actually physically attacking Bob Costas. But he might as well had. I mean, at this point, he was so close to this man's face, he could have definitely taken him out. So yeah. Around this time in the show is when they're talking about the failures of Vince McMahon, the restaurant they opened, the hotel, the casino, the XFL, all of these new ventures that they use the WWE to kind of bolster and push out there all ended up folding. 2003, they lost the eatery. Prior to that, they lost the casino and the hotel. They just closed down. And even before that, they were operating under the guise of WWF. And when the World Wildlife Fund sued WWE for using the WWF logo, they essentially won the right to have that logo. They were using it long before WWE even started using it. And so Vince and Co. had to shift and make changes. Those changes required them to remove the F from their logo and shift to WWE, which is what we know now as World Wrestling Entertainment. And this is just like, when these things happen, you can't dwell on them. You have to continue to keep moving forward. He said, looking to the past or, wallowing in your pity doesn't change what's happening. You can't focus on that. He said, this is something that that was out of our control. And because of that, they have the right to demand their business name and do what they want to do with their moniker. They have that right. So WWE had to shift. And when WWE shifted, that's when the other changes started to come in. The closing of the restaurant, the closing of the hotel and casino, the XFL folding the way that it did. And they had to refocus. As time progressed and Vince McMahon was accepting his failures, he just progressed forward. He didn't change how he did anything. And people that he normally would have kept, or people that you would think that people that he would us as normal human beings would probably be like, I would never hire Eric Bischoff, right? I would never hire back Sable. I would never hire Hogan back after the way they've behaved in the media and in public and just on other programs in general. But Vince McMahon doesn't operate that way. Whatever he believes is good for the business, he's going to do for the business. He feels as though what is necessary for him isn't the issue. It's what is necessary for the business. He's always going to put the business first. So hiring these people who were his adversary at one point is really, really smart, mainly because you get to utilize them to pick their brains to do whatever it is to embolden and better your business. And one of the first ways they did that was to do icon versus icon in terms of Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. This bolstered The Rock for him to go over on Hollywood Hogan, but it also gave Hollywood Hogan, or Hogan in general, a revive in the WWE in terms of him being the hero once again. On the fly in that match, The Rock ended up shifting to being the heel during the match, but that was done by pure happenstance due to the crowd booing him so badly for taking out Hollywood Hulk Hogan. He still won the match and beat Hulk Hogan, but at the end of the day, the match played to the fans' sentiments instead of playing to what the creative said it should be. The Rock was the hero in the sense of the story, and Hollywood Hogan was the villain in the sense of the story. But once that match was over, both of them got exactly what they needed in the match. But then as time progressed, Vince McMahon bought WCW. He absorbed so many superstars and he had so much going on, and they lost the ability to maintain the integrity of the product. The creative process went down and superstars became frustrated. Stone Cold Steve Austin was not happy with the direction of creative. He didn't like the way that they were trying to portray him, and he just wasn't doing it. They would give him something and he'd be like, I would never say this. I'm not going to say this. I'm not doing it. And that frustration was not just felt by Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was felt by a lot of superstars. And this is why they say when Vince doesn't have competition, or when WWE itself as an entity doesn't have competition, they don't thrive well because they have nothing to strive for. They have nothing to change or could fix. They basically are stagnant because they can be. And because of that, now Stone Cold was also very heavily injured. And he was just like, I think it's time for me to just ride off into the sunset and go chill and relax. The Rock ventured into movies, starting off with The Scorpion King, and then he moved into other films, and it took off for him. He was one of Hollywood's biggest attractions, and by 2004, both Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock were gone. And Vince was looking to fill the void that those two left, which I'm going to be honest with you, he has never filled that void. And to be honest, you're never going to, because every superstar that creates their own niche in the WWE, when they become that megastar, that attraction where no matter what they do or how long they're gone, they can come back and shatter glass in terms of how loud the people will be. Those are few and those are very rare diamonds that are there. So it's people like The Rock, it's people like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Currently, on our current roster, I would say it would be Cody Rhodes, of course, the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, and Seth freaking Rollins, Becky Lynch. These people are diamonds in the rough, and they are just essentially a magnet for star power, and more specifically in our world, they are the megastars of this generation. In this sense, Vince was looking for ruthless aggression, and this is when the Attitude Era officially began to die out and ruthless aggression began to take over. And this is when guys like John Cena, Randy Orton, Triple H, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, even Booker T at some point. This is when these guys were made into the stars that they became. And the megastar that came out of the ruthless aggression era, to me, was John Cena, Randy Orton, Edge, and none other than CM Punk. So as the ruthless aggression era began, John Cena was one of those little diamonds that was being built in the ruthless aggression era. Now, John Cena's biggest issue is that he had no personality. There wasn't really anything to him that actually was worthwhile for people to want to latch on to and watch. And because of that, John almost got fired, like a lot. And one day he was on the back of a tour bus and he heard some guys rapping on the back of the bus. So he went back there, started rapping, and he said he shredded everybody. It's possible. I think it was more like he had stiff competition, unless somebody was back there and didn't really have much skill. John Cena's not the greatest rapper. He's all right. His level of cadence is a bit off, but it's not terrible, you know? However, Stephanie McMahon was on the bus, saw him rapping, heard him rapping. She was like, "Would you like to do that on TV?" And he was like, "Fuck yeah, I would." So it's a very white bread response. But anyways, he got the job to be able to do it. And that was his gimmick. That was his shtick. It was no longer ruthless aggression. His gimmick was now he was a rapper, a thug. The kind of guy you don't bring home to dad. You know what I mean? Ew. So, John Cena was talking about how he was able to create the Doctor of Thugonomics and how he utilized aspects of things that he really didn't like to create this over-the-top, arrogant, boisterous character that then became what we now know as John Cena. Now, John Cena said he did exactly what McMahon did for himself for John Cena. He took the aspects of people that he didn't care for and created and crafted this villainous heel character. Now, John Cena seems to really admire Vince McMahon, and he has a lot of respect for him. You can tell by how he speaks about Vince McMahon. Then they started talking about punishments and how if you didn't want to do a particular storyline, you were punished, or how if you disagreed with the storyline, you might have been punished. Trish Stratus was like, I remember once there was a storyline where I was the champion and I was supposed to make out with a female character, and she said, I don't think that would be something that my character would do. And then she said a week later, she lost the championship. Did she think that she was punished? She said it can be perceived that way, but she said she genuinely didn't know, but that was the thought process originally. Triple H was just like, they asked Triple H were there some storylines that he didn't want to do, and he was like, yeah, there were a lot of them, but Vince would make you do it anyway. And then you saw the necrophilia where he was banging out somebody, and then he picked up her brains and was like, I screwed your brains out, and then threw them at the camera. It was gross. It was so gross. The lady's legs were spread over the casket. I was like, yeah, that's attractive. That's something we all need to see. Then that's great. Anyway, then they asked Stephanie, and Stephanie said there were a couple storylines that I didn't want to do, and she didn't want to mention it. But her father had no fucking shame. He was like, there was a storyline where Stephanie was pregnant, and he said the character of Mr. McMahon was the one who got her pregnant. And I was like, you were going to use incest as a storyline. The way my brain, I literally just want to cuss you the fuck out, bro. Like, what is there's no level to which you will not stoop, and that is problematic for me. It is so toxic, it's so problematic. You will exploit every aspect of your family to the detriment of her, yourself, your wife, your son, your grandkids, all for the sake of the business and one storyline that could possibly be successful. It's funny how things come back around on the back end. So it was alluded to the fact that Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon were butting heads, and they often butted heads because Shane was very headstrong in what he felt like he wanted to do and how he wanted to expand in WWE. He wanted to have an opportunity to prove that he was a good booker, that he was a good businessman in general. And he wanted his dad to buy him a company that he could run to prove what he said was true. The very same thing that Vince McMahon asked of his own father is the same thing that Shane asked of his. But Vince was not as willing to do for Shane what was done for him. Shane saw the value in UFC and what it could potentially be. He thought it was really cool with the mixed martial arts and them fighting in the octagon every 3 to 6 months. And he just really enjoyed the concept of UFC. He presented it to his father and to the company, and he was just like, listen, UFC is in financial troubles. I think we should buy them. This is a good business model. We've got everything they need, merchandising. We've got the live event staff. We've got everything they need. And he was like, it's just basically a plug and play. His father shot it down, said no, he didn't like the business model. He felt like they create characters. This is a sport. And I'm like, oh, well, not to blow your ass out, but you didn't have a problem with diving headfirst into the XFL and not knowing the first fucking thing about football, but you want to downgrade and disrespect his son when in the end, you ended up selling WWE to UFC. You ended up joining forces with UFC anyway, which just goes to show you how smart Shane McMahon really is and how you didn't value your son's input and his intelligence in the business, which was why Shane would disappear the way that he did. And I don't fucking blame him. I really don't. Shane's need to be at the helm of WWE was necessary. He felt like it was time for his dad to give it up and let him take over. And he had ideas that he wanted to push through, which Vince vetoed immediately. He didn't like his ideas. And because he was the guy, there was nothing that Shane could do or say to change his mindset. And rather than to continue to stay in a place where he did not feel like his views were being respected or his ideas were being respected, and to not fight with his father anymore, he chose to leave. There was an instance where Paul Heyman recalls the two men were at each other's throats over a creative decision. And Shane McMahon wanted to do something that Vince was vehemently against. And he was like, not while I'm alive. And he said he was eating something and he grabbed a knife and was like, here, you want to do this? You're going to have to kill me to do it. Put the dagger in my chest. And then he says, if you don't do it, then I know that you're not the man that I need you to be or that you need to be. And I know you don't have the cojones to actually do it, which is another problem because you're going to have to, or you could just buy this company from me the way that I bought my company from my dad. He forgets that his father actually loaned him the money to buy the company and then he had to pay that money back. But, you know, c'est la vie. He said, if you want it, you need to pay for it. If you want to do this your way and change how everything is, then you're going to have to kill me to do it. And if you can't do it, then I know that you don't have the guts to do what's necessary to run this business. Essentially, what he told him is that he's not good enough and he's not strong enough, which is a shitty way to talk to your kid, if we're being honest. And I think that Shane took his cues from his father, but he's a different kind of man. He loved his father. He didn't want to hurt him, and he wasn't going to use business as a means of being ruthless and cutthroat with people. He just wasn't going to do that. He understood that he had to make some decisions that were hard for the business, but he knew where things were headed. He knew that that company was going to implode on itself if they didn't do what was necessary to shift and to change. But I don't think he knew the logistics of that implosion and how far things would actually go. I don't think he knew that. And it's scary days. It is scary days. We're getting ready to head up to the last episode of the show. I am so ready for this last episode. I have been sitting here for almost 2 hours watching this and giving you guys a full blow-by-blow and play-by-play. I'm going to give you my final assessment in this last episode. I'm going to try to keep this last episode as short as possible and not drag it out to being an hour, because I know that can be so much on y'all for it to be an hour. That can be too much. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And please, please, please be advised that the next episode is going to involve the scandal that rocked WWE a few years ago. It caused Vince's first resignation. So be careful of the triggering words of SA, rape, and other words that are going to be said in this documentary if you watch it on the last episode, because I have a feeling that that is going to be brought up along with the new phase of WWE and where it's headed. I don't think they're going to make that last episode all about the allegations, but I do think it's definitely going to come up, and it has to. It has to come up. With all that being said, ladies and gents, I'm going to see y'all in the next one.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more wrestling content. Check out our merch and consider becoming a member for exclusive perks, special emojis, and members-only content.